Hey BookTube, I'm back with another video. This video I want to do a review. So this will be a review of a novel I recently read called Room by Emma Donoghue. This is my first book by Emma Donoghue. I've not read anything else by her, but I decided to pick this one up. I bought this one quite a while ago, and I don't quite remember why, but I remember having this on my shelf for quite some time, and I thought I would give it a read. So that's what I did. And just a note before I dive into this book and my thoughts on this book, I am going to be spoiling the book. So all my discussions of my thoughts on a certain book, I'm not going to hold back certain facts about the ending or anything like that. If I consider them relevant in my experience in reading it, which is why I consider these videos my thoughts instead of any kind of review. So anyways, my thoughts with this book, Room. So first off, the story follows Jack, who's a 5-year-old boy, and he's living in a room with his mother. And that room is his entire world, and he doesn't really understand anything else other than that room. So he names everything in that room. That whole room is his world, so then when he talks about the bed or when he talks about the table, it's capitalized. It's table, it's bed. They're all names. And he does that with everything in the room that they live in, including room. Room is just capital R room. Because he doesn't know anything different, because he was born in that room and he's never been outside that room. And he's never left that room, and nor has his mother. And as the story goes along, we get details about what is actually happening, and it becomes pretty clear, or pretty quickly it becomes clear that the room is actually that his mother is held captive by this man who uses her basically as a sex slave, and he had kidnapped her 7 years ago when she was still a teenager. I think 19 is the age when she was in university, and brought her to this room that he had constructed in his yard, or which was a shed, but he made it into a prison cell essentially, where it was soundproof. The only window is a strong window on the roof, which is like a skylight and something that she cannot break. And the room is locked at all periods, and the only time she ever sees anyone else is when he comes in occasionally to, of course, rape her, basically. And through the process of when that happens, she gives birth to a child, and his name is Jack. And Jack basically is everything to his mother. His mother adores Jack and wants as normal life as she can possibly give him in this room, in the current circumstances that they're in. So, for example, every night before they go to bed, she has him sleep in the wardrobe. So she has a bed for him at the bottom there, just in case the man comes in, which we don't know him by his real name. He's only called Old Nick. And just in case he comes into the room, because she doesn't want him to have any contact with her son. And if he does not come, then she brings Jack into the bed, and then he wakes up in the bed in the morning. And this whole novel is written from Jack's perspective, which is a very interesting narrative choice, because writing from a 5-year-old boy, I can imagine, would have been very difficult to come up with a lot of the narrative choices that she decides in here. And overall, I think she does a really good job at approaching the world from the perspective of a 5-year-old boy. And because she has him take things very seriously and very realistically whenever they're meant to be figuratively. And I guess I should talk more about the story. So the first half of this novel is them in the room. Then they attempt an escape route, or an escape plan, which involves, which is very spontaneous. They only, his mother comes up with it within a few days, and they execute it right away. Much to Jack's resentment, because the room is all he knows, and he doesn't want to be. He knows the place outside the door is just called outside, and he doesn't really know what outside is, or has any conception of what he's missing out there. And so that just seems like a scary aspect of change, in which he does not seem interested in at all, because he's quite comfortable in a room, and obviously his mother is not. And so halfway through this book, about halfway through the book, they escape. Jack plays dead. He's rolled up in a carpet, and then his mother tells old Nick that he's dead and that she'll never forgive him. Kind of plays the role of the grieving mother, and that he has to be buried, but not inside their backyard. And we find out later why, because before she had Jack, she also had a daughter who, because of old Nick not wanting anyone to know who that he keeps this woman in this room, she has to perform the birthing process all by herself. So the first time she gives birth to a daughter who is stillborn, because the umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck and she died. She was never alive, and that devastated her. So when she has Jack, she has to she makes sure that she learns differently, and makes sure that she makes everything as safe as possible. But the plan works. Jack escapes, and he goes to the nearest person, and that person ends up calling the police, and Jack is left behind as old Nick tries to make his escape. And what I really appreciated about this aspect of that novel is that Emma Donoghue does not go for any sensationalism in this book, or not any. She doesn't indulge in it like you easily could in a story that gruesome, where you have a woman who's trapped by a man who basically uses her for sex, and that's what he does. So what Emma Donoghue could have done is made this book into a horror show of like the evil and cruelty of this man, and like had her like basically beaten and subjugated and all that kind of stuff, which does not happen, because it's clear that even at some instance that she does have control over him, and she does have influence over him. Because basically this old Nick character is an old, jobless incel who has basically no friends or any kind of social life, and which explains why he would kidnap a woman, right? Because presumably he's been rejected countless times. Though she does not go into old Nick's background at all. We just get the escape halfway through, and the rest of the book, which is actually the most surprising for me, was just Jack getting acquainted with this new world that he's experiencing, a world that he's not had any contact with for his entire life. So he's basically grows up in this one room, and then he goes out into the world, and the world is very complex, it's very difficult, and for him, even spatially, like he keeps bumping into things because he's never had to develop any spatial awareness other than what was in his room. So even when they're at the hospital, and then when he later goes to his grandmother's house, life is very difficult, very different for him. How he acts and how he treats other people, is very new to him. How he even interacts with kids of his own age, and so what surprised me about this book is that it's more of a book about Jack, Jack and Jack's mother, Jack's mother as a mother and how she raises him, but also about Jack, his different perspectives as he grows up, or as he views these two different worlds that he was a part of. So because he was familiar with certain things that were outside of the room through the TV. They had a TV in their room, and so he always thought like this reality, or what we would consider reality, was just TV. And his mother was very strict about TV. You don't watch too much TV; that'll make your brain turn to mush. So and there was a lot of make believe and made up stories on TV. You can't trust everything that you watch on TV. So he assumed that so much of what was a part of the real world was just TV. And so now when he comes acquainted with this stuff in real life, it's very difficult and very different for him. And I thought the adults portrayed in this story through Jack's perspective was actually really good. The adults are very believable. A lot of them get exasperated with Jack, because Jack is just 5 years old. He's got like the very innocent, very strictly logical view of the world, where things have to be strictly A or B, and they can't be otherwise. And if he's told otherwise, then it confuses him, and he voices that confusion, and then that makes the adults around him, either they find it funny, as some adults do, or some adults have a very short patience. And his grandmother has a short patience with him. And but one of the touching aspects of this book too is his grandmother, during the time when his mother was kidnapped to when she escapes, her parents divorced, and so then she's married to another guy, and Jack calls him Stepa, so Stepa, and he was unexpectedly charming because Jack's mother, is very cold to him, and but he's one of the very few characters in here who actually get down on Jack's level and take him seriously. And what I said before too, Jack takes everything literally, and so when people talk figuratively, it really confuses him, which I found quite fitting for the 5-year-old perspective. Though I found myself initially, when I was reading this, I got quite frustrated with the writing style, the 5-year-old perspective. And I don't know if that says a lot about me and how I view the world versus, say, how a 5-year-old views the world, and how you have to have that kind of patience that you would with a child who's very new in developing the understanding of the world. And then in Jack's case, the extreme case, where he hasn't been a part of the world at all, and now he has to come to grips with the hugeness of the world, which is a theme in this book, is just how big the world is compared to the room that he grew up in. And I would say that this novel is very much so in the back of my edition here, there's an interview with the author, and when I peeked into this before I read this, and she says that she incorporated a lot of echoing of texts that have influenced her. And one of them was, she says that there's echoes of Plato in this book. So there's echoes of Plato. And that got me thinking, because I've been reading Plato on my own, independently of my decision to pick up this novel. And I get the idea that the entire conception of the story, overarching story, is like the Plato's analogy of the cave. So you have these people who were chained up in this cave, at the very bottom of the cave. They're chained to look at this wall, and there's a fire behind them, and in between the fire and them chained and looking at the wall, there's people passing by with whatever signs or whatever in their hands that make distinct impressions on the wall. And these people who are chained and looking at this wall, they only know this reality. They only know the shadows on the wall. and to them that is reality. They don't know anything differently. But then one of them takes off his chains, and he crawls past the fire and out of the cave and into the actual world with the sun, and everything's blinding. He doesn't understand everything, but then distinctly as he gets used to it, things start to take shape, and though he still cannot look at the sun, he can see the distinct impression and how it illuminates the world. And that's basically this novel, where you have Jack. He's in the room. He's never known anything differently, but when he goes out into the world, he is baffled by it. He's confused by it, but he's also rather interested by it and curious about it. And even though he still latches on to what he used to know, he's still getting used to the world and getting acquainted with the world, even though there's a distinct separation between him and his mother. His mother does not ever want to go back to the room, but he still looks at the room fondly, and he thinks the world was so much simpler and so much easier back in the room that he wishes he could go back. And that leads me to talking about the ending of this book is exactly that. His mother finally gets fed up with him talking about how the glories of the room and how it was so much simpler and better, that she ends up calling the police that helped her on that one day when she was freed. She calls them up and has them take her and Jack back to the room onto the property with Old Nick, who's long since been captured by the police, and so he's not there. And they go back to the room, and it's a touching ending with Jack going around the room and seeing not only how different the room seems, but how small the room seems. And he's like, but I thought room was bigger. I thought room was different. And he's like, where is everything that we used to have it? Like, where was plant? Where was dresser? You know, there's the mark. He looks for certain distinctions and markers from when he used to live in a room. But he says distinctly, it's not room anymore. He says that it's... And then he thinks to himself, maybe it's because once you open the door to room, it no longer is room, and things are different, and fundamentally different, in a way that he still is learning to understand. And the very last moments is him saying goodbye to all the common markers in the room in which he had grown up with. And he says goodbye to them with their capital letters. And that is it's about Jack coming to terms with the reality. He says goodbye floor, goodbye wall, goodbye bed, goodbye wardrobe, and he also says goodbye roof. And that's it. They leave the room and never to go back to that room again. And even though that's the source of his mother's trauma, she was willing to go back to this room so that Jack could be acquainted with it for one final time and see just how different and how much better the real world is, the complicated world, the world of so many people and so many obligations and so many different things that he does not understand, and how it's different from the world that he grew up in, and how much better and how his perspective has changed over time. And yeah, so I would say that's all that I want to talk about this novel, about Room. I hope my discussion sort of made sense, and if it sounds like it would be something that would interest you, then I recommend that you pick it up. Thanks a lot.